Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's call on my good friend Kenny Lee. I think you've been promoted to a panelist. Let's introduce yourself, Kenny.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kenny. I've had a very fortunate opportunity to work very closely with many of the people on stage today over the past 3 months or so, as I kind of get my feet wet as a congressman for Liberland. And it's truly been an honor and a very unique experience. And so, first and foremost, is just thank you for everyone who gave me the opportunity to learn and try to figure out exactly where I can demonstrate most of my skills. I think during that time, I've learned a lot, and I've realized that as part of Liberland's growth, we really need to position ourselves um, not just as a blockchain state, for example, but more so how do we drive that in a very user-friendly, adoption forward manner, right? And what I mean by that is, when we think about things like the architecture around our blockchain, whether it's Polkadot, EVM based, at the end of the day, I don't want us to fall under the trap of using technology for the sake of technology, but rather using technology as an enablement to drive further adoption and growth for Liberland as a nation. Um, and so I think like one of my areas of focus, being that I myself have been in the blockchain space for over the past decade, I specialize in understanding these types of technologies as well as understanding adoption in terms of what works in this space, what doesn't. And I think I would love to continue to do my work as a congressman to drive efforts there. Furthermore, I'm also located in the United States. I was at the inauguration representing Liberland alongside many of the colleagues here today, and had an opportunity to start building relationships with some of the senators, governors, former governors, etc. Um, that I think could lead to very good sort of long-term stances on behalf of Liberland, and so would love to continue driving there as well. And like I said, right, doing congressman for about 3 months, so still got a lot to learn, still got a lot to do, and I'm really looking forward to trying to figure that all out alongside everyone and being as helpful and productive as I can. And congratulations as well to Liberland and its 10-year anniversary. That's quite a milestone, and I think this is only the beginning. And so, really excited to help how I can.
Perfect. Great introduction, Kenny. Thank you so much. Let's call on Kenny Lee. What are the three most important priorities Liberland has as a nation, as a government? What do you think, Kenny?
Yeah, sure. So I think that Liberland, the way that I see its growth is broken out into two components. The first one is what we want it to be eventually, and the second one is what do we have to get accomplished today. And so, within the category of what we need to get accomplished today, the three most important points I see from just my recent experience is one, definitely getting recognition from other nations, because at the end of the day, this is an effort that we are trying to build not just by ourselves, because I don't think it's as simple as, claiming a state and just, calling it a day. I think there's a lot of complexity that goes into it for everyone here. Everyone's familiar with the history of all this, so I won't get into detail about that. So I do think in the short term, having recognition from other nations is going to be extremely critical for our growth. That's the first thing. Second is thinking about how we grow internally. And that is also kind of subdivided into two segments. One is how we increase our citizenship in the right manner, right? Because at the end of the day, what I think Liberland would like to have is a brand, a recognizable voice in the world where people are seeing great citizens and great contributions coming out of this nation. And so we have to think about how we do that in a very sort of methodical manner. And the second part of that is also how do we grow from a financial perspective, right? This nation is not going to grow out of thin air. It requires money, it requires contribution, it requires capital. So we have to think about it from that side as well. And I think the third thing that that Liberland needs in the short term is purely just publicity, right? I think people like Avon are doing such a great job on that. I think we can also tap into a lot of the crypto community, which is also very leaning towards libertarian, work more closely with them, start aligning and building the brand there. And so in the short term, those are the three sort of categories I'd see that Liberland needs.
Let's hear from Kenny on this question. Our most important international partners. You mentioned the US already, and that's something we can work on, but let's talk a little bit about that, Kenny. Most important.
Sure, yeah. So I think definitely we're all in agreement right now. It seems to some level that the U.S. is probably standing out as the most strategic partner that we can have, and I do agree with Dorian that we are still a teenager, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be having these conversations because I think at the end of the day, it's less important about us necessarily getting in front of the United States or the Middle East or Asia or wherever we want to be, but more important to understand what are their interests in what we're doing, right? And these interests may not necessarily come from the fact that we're building a libertarian state on the right next to the Danube. I don't know if that's what would get Donald Trump excited at night, right? But at the end of the day, we need to understand exactly what gets him excited and what gets other world leaders excited to know who we want to align with at the end of the day. I agree, it's very early to say who we want to align with right now, especially in, the macro sort of perspective. Everything's in turmoil, everything's unpredictable. And so I would be a bit conservative in making a decision on who we go with. But I would say that we need to be having conversations with all of these nations, right? Especially, looking at the Middle East, looking at UAE, looking at China, looking at Korea, Japan, right? These are all stretch goals, as entrepreneurs would say. But we need to understand what are their asks from us and start doing those side quests as well in order to start hitting all those check marks so that at the end of the day, we can eliminate all the no's from everyone who wants to work with us so that we can get directly to that yes.
What's your vision for Liberland 5-10 years down the road?
Yeah, so good question. I think when it comes to government, things tend to move a little bit slower than originally anticipated. So I can't say exactly that this would be 5 or 10 years down the road or what part of that spectrum it falls under. But for myself, right, like what I see Liberland as symbolically around the world is an amazing case study and an amazing sort of leader in demonstrating to the entire world how 21st century government can be run. And the reality is that Liberland itself physically is not a very large space, but I don't think that will hopefully limit us to the citizens and the talent and the economic activity that we're going to be able to produce 5 to 10 years from now or wherever that may lay. And I think that's going to be a testament to exactly how the world will operate in 5 to 10 years, whether we're at that point or not. Because right now, we already see this movement towards more of like a digital nomad, accessible anywhere 24/7, building around the world, having this sort of decentralized movement towards building, different sort of innovations that we already see contributing to the world. I think Liberland can be the first sort of government that fosters that type of innovation. And that's the sort of, I think, nation I'd like to see that doesn't just represent one small area within Europe, but also a representative of citizens all around the world who have diverse talents.
Kenny, let's get Kenny back on. Who are some of your favorite thinkers, philosophers, writers, role models, people you look to for inspiration? Kenny, what do you think? Let us know.
So I want to preface this by saying, thinking about this question, I realize like a lot of these sort of thinkers, role models that I look up to, respect, have this unifying theme of not just creativity, but critical thinking, thinking about how to break foundations and build everything from scratch in a different manner. So commonly referred to as like first principles. And so from that sort of bucket, also Ayn Rand, Patrick. So seems like we have same sort of philosopher there, or author, and Aristotle as well. And the third, obviously a little bit cliche, but also my father. I think that everyone is a product of their childhood, and as a result, right, like you can't really discredit any bigger influence on you than probably your parents. But regardless, right, I think all three, what they have in common is this idea of building everything from the foundation and thinking differently. And I think that's exactly what a nation like Liberland needs, because we have this opportunity not just to build, another sort of Dubai, which I think that's an amazing idea, but also, what should Dubai look like in 2030? Because in 2030, Dubai is still going to look like what it looked like in 2020, right? But it could be vastly different. So what does that look like, and how do we build from there? I think that's extremely critical, to think uniquely, and that's the opportunity we have.
Address on how we can preserve the natural beauty of the region. That's really an amazing place. If and that's why they take cruises down the Danube River, because it's just so beautiful. Kenny, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day is, maybe this might sound a little harsh or controversial, but it's not my decision whether or not we preserve the natural beauty of Liberland and its environment, right? At the end of the day, it's the responsibility of all of the citizens, and collectively, we need to decide whether or not this is the route we want to go, whether or not we want to go a high-tech route that has no compromise, or somewhere in between. In the event that we do decide to go on the route of, protecting the environment, which I am very much for, there are a lot of creative ways to do this, right? Like as Frode mentioned about what I mentioned earlier, one of the options is that we create more of a dispersed nation. And the dispersed nation doesn't just mean that our citizens are living everywhere around the world, but how do we support their living all around the world, right? Because physically, within Liberland itself, there's only a small area of space that we can jam 100,000 people, 1 million people into. And that's probably not what we want to do. And so the question now is, how can we build potentially satellite villages, satellite communities in other nations that cooperate with us, that recognize us? And, this is probably another one of those factors in the 5 to 10 year vision that we were discussing earlier. But I think that can be a very adaptive 21st century strategy that shows a globalized nation while also preserving the environmental sanctity of what Liberland has currently.
Let me call on. I'll call on Kenny now. What do you think Liberland's position could be as far as geopolitics go, as far as the great powers, as far as war and peace? Could you comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think especially in the short term, right? Like it's not a question of, where we want to be, but rather what are the tools at our disposal, which I think severely limits us to which cards we can play. And that's why I also tend to see us more of on the Swiss strategy rather than an aggressive player in this world of geopolitics. That being said, I think it still echoes back to one of the comments I made at the beginning of this whole conversation, which was that, we need to first be having conversations with the stakeholders that we truly want involved, that we truly want as partners, that as strategic alliances moving forward. And we have to understand exactly, what they want from us, what they want from the world, and the components that we can contribute to. I think from there we can decide exactly what sort of road we want to take. But I think right now we don't really have much information about that, especially not in a geopolitical environment. So it's a bit too premature to say. But yeah, definitely don't see us having an army anytime soon.
Right, right. We don't even have a provision for it in our Constitution to have a standing army.